Hello and welcome to today's Think Tank Accelerate program, Key Trends for 2014. Our presentation today is undertaken by Mark Young, President of ShiftCentral, and Mark Power, founder of Concep. The presentation is entitled, Marketing Goes Mobile. Resources for business development have to be available on the go. Today's presentation is just one of a series of 8 short webinar-style presentations, each addressing a key trend we believe is coming in 2014. Those are listed right here on this slide. As each is recorded, it's going to be made available and distributed across the Think Tank page on the Legal Marketing website. The address of that is given at the bottom of the slide. Our final event is going to be a live event taking place in collaboration with the LA chapter of the LMA relating to issues of change management. We look forward to sharing more information about that as it becomes available. So to today's presentation, our presenters are Mark Young and Mark Power, and their presentation is all about mobile marketing. As attorneys have become more and more fluent in the use of mobile devices, they will expect marketing content to be available to them wherever they are, and particularly if they're en route to clients, prospects, or referral sources. We'd love you to be engaged in the conversation, and if you'd like to contribute using social media, we encourage you to use 2 hashtags to make sure that others can keep track of what you're saying. Use hashtag Accelerate and hashtag Mobile to make sure that you're properly plugged in. And with no further ado, I will turn now to Mark and Mark. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian. Firstly, I'd like to just ensure that we cover off what we're here to talk about today. And there is a lot going on in the world of technology, in the world of marketing right now, but mobile is a trend that's something that we can't ignore. And what we're trying to do today is just get across some key points and some key takeaways for everyone to try and understand how mobile can work for business development for professional services firms. And that's what we're going to try and cover off for you today. And why are Mark and Mark from ShiftCentral and Concep here today together? Well, the fact is ShiftCentral is a content company and Concep is a technology company, and those two things combined is really where the future of marketing is. If you combine content with technology, that is really the 2 fundamentals of your marketing strategy for most firms moving forward. And we're going to cover how we can help you maximize those 2 things. Okay, we have a small agenda. We're going to talk about why mobilize and give a bit of a business case around that. We'll touch on some of the technology. We'll then look at the applications, the practical applications for professional services firms. We'll then touch on the type of content you could mobilize and what you should be considering. And then we'll take a look into the future, what's going to be happening and what are the things that we need to think about for our marketing in the future. And then we'll give you some key takeaways that you can think about. But initially I thought it might be good to give you some of the macro data. Now this is probably of no surprise to anyone, but there is so much happening in the world of technology, both at a personal level, what we do as people, individuals, but also as business users. But as you can see from research such as this by Business Intelligence and Gartner, what we can see is just this huge rise in tablets and smartphones, and soon to be wearables is what they're calling them. And that is just a huge, huge shift compared to the growth we saw in personal computers and smartphones in the early days. You can see just a huge, rapid shift towards these mobile devices. Then you're looking at tablets starting to really creep into the domination of the PC. And 18% of tablet purchases will be made directly by enterprises in 2017, which is an interesting fact. The vast majority is currently personal, but that 18% is significant because that makes up a very decent chunk of the amount of overall purchases. We then look at average minutes spent per interaction and device, and what you can see here, which we found very interesting, was that the tablet and the PC are soon to be probably at even keel. And now that's very interesting because we've all probably been working on PCs and laptops for many years, and now what we're seeing is the tablet has taken up much of our time, but that would be combined business and personal use.
So if you look at certainly the intelligence in front of you on this slide, these statistics speak for themselves. The tablet, the mobile platform has got to be and will increasingly become the hub of the lawyer's business development tool chest. Think of it as the tool chest. Is your firm mobilizing? That's what we're here to explore. That's what we're here to help you accelerate your plans to that end. Now, if we look at the important question, why mobilize, there is obviously a tremendous amount of utility here. The ability, the requirement that firms bring their brand to life, the requirement that law firms think of themselves as publishers. The reality in today's marketplace is that every brand, regardless of sector, but especially in the professional services arena, every brand is a publisher, and content is the best way to think in terms of how to differentiate your business. There is a need, there is an expectation for clients to articulate their value proposition so that the lawyers servicing them fully understand how they define value. That is something that's critical. There is a need for lawyers to demonstrate that they are bringing that value proposition to life. There is a requirement that lawyers demonstrate that they are immersed in the world of their clients. And the world is moving at such a blindingly fast pace that the mobile platform becomes a must-have tool.
Yeah, and what we're seeing, Mark, is the professionals are actually loving tablets. Even though the firm may not issue them one, we're seeing them turn up to meetings with clients, internal meetings, with their own personal device. And how does the firm react to that? Well, it should be reacting in a proactive way, because it ultimately increases productivity. And we've seen a huge surge in these enterprise apps. Only a couple of years ago, you might have been using your own personal apps, but now enterprise apps, whether they're software companies that have delivered one for multiple enterprises or your own custom app, well, it's much more achievable now to get these in and be using them on behalf of your firm. And then you've got the ability to sort of make your brand interactive and bring that to life. That really is something that previously could not be done on a laptop as easily, or even on traditional paper-based mechanisms. So being able to sort of swipe and show people things, and that's sort of changing the game, really.
And that kind of tactile engagement, talk a little bit more about that, Mark, as to how that is changing the way in which content is being used in the mobile.
Well, it's almost like content's now fun to sift through and curate and share. Previously, it was documentation in Word documents, PDFs, that would be top to bottom scrolling. Now you can sort of interact with content in a very different way, and the future of that is really in visualization. We know a lot of firms at the moment who are trying to bring traditionally stagnant data and information into a bit more of a visual concept that they can swipe and increase and decrease and things like that. It's quite interesting what's going on. But that final point there is really about the appearance of being innovative and tech-enabled. In this very competitive world of professional services now, it really is important to be seen as tech-enabled and being ahead of the game. And if you're doing the traditional thing that you might have done, I think it's now a time to consider how can you be adopting these new technologies to not just be productive, but also be seen as highly competitive and tech-enabled. But there are some challenges. There's no doubt that the big challenge for firms, professional services firms, is insecurity. So, you know, there's a vast majority, I think it was 94% we saw just earlier, of devices are personal devices that lawyers would be using currently. Now, that's an overwhelming statistic. So how does a firm deal with that? You know, that's something that they need to consider, and that's about, you know, providing software at the very least that allows them to stay secure. There's also cultural challenges towards innovation. This isn't what we used to do. Well, I remember I run a business that's in digital marketing, and only about 5 years ago you had firms saying that they will never email their clients' newsletters. Well, that is now standard, and we're going to see mobile becoming a standard as well and mobilizing all your content. There are challenges around overcomplicating requirements. We've heard certain firms wanting to mobilize every part of their back office function and start to mobilize all of their marketing and business development functions. Well, you can't mobilize everything at the same time, particularly because each function is different. So you have to make sure that you keep things simple, particularly in these early days. Then you've got to adopt your content for mobile. Hopefully your marketing teams and business development teams are thinking about how content should be in a state that could then go to any channel or any device. And then retaining the viewers is probably the most challenging part in a business development context, is to make sure that your content, you're not creating an app just for the sake of creating an app. You're actually creating something or a place for your viewers, whether they be internal or external, to keep coming back and viewing that content and interacting with it.
And that's where we need to underscore, again, the critical importance of understanding how the viewer, the reader, defines value. And without that kind of understanding, any kind of effort here where you're aligning your technology and aligning your business development tools will not get the lift that's required.
So here's some more techie things for those people who may not be in the know. Some of you may, but there are also many who mobile is still very, very new to them. But there are things like BYOD, which is being banded around the place. It's quite a common term now, but it is bring your own device. And many firms are having to face the facts that whether they're junior members or management or senior partners, people are now bringing the one personal device to use for business purposes. You've then got the different types of apps out there. There are native and hybrid apps, and the beauty of these is the content can be accessed offline, but there are challenges of deploying native and hybrid apps and the cost of them. But then you have web apps, and that's where content can be accessed very quickly, like a web page it would be accessed, but it generally cannot be accessed offline. But I think in the future, web apps are going to become standard as the web gets more advanced. You then have HTML5, which is a mobile-friendly programming language. And what that means is it's just going to ultimately give a consistent experience to your viewers, whether they're internal or external. And what that means is your website, if it's in an HTML5 or another language similar to it, it can actually, once it's being developed, it can then work on a tablet, work on a smartphone, and the multiple different variations of those, and it will be consistent for whoever's viewing. But the big thing that is happening in professional services, or we believe is going to happen soon, is the adoption of sales enablement. And that's really about delivering the right information to the right professional at the right time and place.
There are incredible pressures, obviously, put on fee earners, on the professional staff to do more with less. And the reality is we are moving at such a pace that everybody is in the business of business development. Everybody is in the business of client development. And there's got to be almost a democratization of content in a way that will accelerate, no pun intended, the client development strategies and tactics.
Yes, and sales enablement, it's nothing new. Mobile hasn't just reinvented sales enablement. It's been around in the IT world for many years, but mobile is now facilitating it across many, many sectors where content can be accessed. Up-to-date content is accessed immediately and then can be collaborated with, shared, curated, and it's very, very powerful stuff, and that's what we'll touch on today.
So we're going to go through in sort of very clip fashion a couple of categories here that speak to the utilitarian use and the kind of actionable insight. We mentioned up front, obviously, the increased importance of content marketing and for law firms to be thinking in terms of themselves as publishers. And we said a couple of stats up front, a couple more that I've seen that are pretty compelling. $118.4 billion will be spent on content marketing, video marketing, and social media this year, 2013. That's from eMarketer. And this is across sectors. Another stat, marketers spend over 25% of their marketing budget on content marketing. That's from B2B Marketing Insider. And then 78% of CMOs think custom content is the future of marketing. that came from Hanley Wood Business Media. So if we think in those terms, we think about the need to creatively capture, and I'm talking about capturing for internal purposes as well as external purposes, content that is market-facing, that is client-facing, that is looking forward to the extent that lawyers have got to be providing, again, that added extra insight. If you look at how brand loyalty is defined and you look at some of the critical drivers there, this becomes a terrific resource to accomplish that.
Yeah, and it's important that, you know, we're not just, we hear so often is oh, we want an app, we want an app. Well, what is that app going to do? And if you're going to mobilize content, is it going to be consistently updated? Is it going to be of value to the audience, the target audience? Just it's marketing 101 that you need to apply to these things. And we're seeing some firms distribute premium content apps. It's very common now to in the corporate world to be distributing premium content apps. So this would be username and password, or download an app and there would be specific content waiting for you of interest to you. Whether you're a bank or whether you're another type of corporation, this is going to start feeding into professional services. But it's very important to note, let's just not you know, feed that content in and keep it consistent, but let's use the data that these apps are capturing, such as client content preferences and the level of interest and the level of engagement that they have when they're using these tools.
And back just to the importance of content, we're talking about custom content. We're talking about content that is highly relevant, that is laser focused, that is created specifically for the users that you care about.
Yeah. Then we have sales enablement apps. Now, we talked about sales enablement, and it's really to help the lawyers and the fee earners you know, prepare for the meetings and engage with clients and prospects, and use a mobile device and its software to be able to you know, bring up relevant content so that they can capture cross-selling opportunities and share the right type of content with either their team or with those that they're trying to engage with. And it's becoming something that which we believe will change the way that a fee earner interacts with content that may have traditionally been print and sometimes now in electronic formats, but now it's really bringing that content to life. But the beauty is you can actually start to understand which business development content is popular, both amongst the fee earners and amongst those who you're sharing it with externally. You can start to capture and track opportunities. You know, on a tablet device, you can quickly, in a meeting or an event or in a type of engagement, you can quickly insert details, and then that could then feed into CRM, for example, and then you can track all those opportunities, which traditionally might have been straight onto a business card. And then you can gauge professional engagement in the business development process, and that's something that is very difficult to track. And what sales enablement tools allow you to do is to see who is using these tools and who is engaging with these and using them in the way that they need to be used. And that's something that's quite powerful for a senior partner, for someone in business development to understand which of the fee earners are being involved in the business development process.
So obviously we've got other utilitarian uses here. Mark, talk a bit about events, and obviously that is a marketing imperative in most law firms. A lot of time, money, and effort is put into events. Talk a little bit about how we can, again, drive even more return on that investment.
Yes, and that's what it's all about, ROI. And essentially, the events that law firms would put on range from a cocktail evening, a breakfast seminar, right through to quite heavy, in-depth one-day conferences, two-day conferences, and multiple-day partner retreats. We don't believe that you need to mobilize every single one of those, but where there is content, where there is a level of engagement that you need to have with either your employees or with your clients, we believe that you should start to think about mobilizing events. We already are seeing this happen in the professional services sector. It's certainly happening in the corporate sector, where event apps on a smartphone or tablet can actually really give important business development data, such as, again, levels of topic interest and engagement. You can see who's networking with whom. So it's a little big brother-ish, but the good thing is you can actually see who's connecting with whom at different events that you're holding, and that's quite of importance to a senior partner. You could also find clients and prospects if you're holding a large event. So using these tools, there's some nice little handy features such as I want to find my client or know when they've arrived, and also capturing event feedback amongst many other data points that start to feed into the business development process.
Great. And riffing off of the importance of events, this is a way to think in terms of, again, how content can be mined, captured, and used on the ground, or as we say, in the field. So with the right technology platform, with the use of a mobile device, your lawyers, your professional team members who are out in the field at industry events, out at the field at conferences, out in the field outside of a courtroom, in the hallway. There's going to be invaluable prospective client, competitor, industry domain expert touches that can be captured right there at the source, and obviously with the right back end, then used to create greater efficiencies.
Absolutely. But then there's also, we're starting to see a sort of shift for things that traditionally may have been presented in traditional formats such as print or done in different ways. We're seeing in outside of professional services all sorts of different applications being brought in and mobilized. This example here is a large Fortune 500 food manufacturing company, and what they're trying to do is give real clarity and sort of transparency about how they can deliver ROI to their clients or to convince prospects of that. And so they have things like calculators about how they can save a client money or make a client money. And that's quite important. I think that with where professional services is going, with more transparency around billing and things like that, certain tools and calculators and widgets can be brought into these types of mobile environments and be very quickly and easily presented to a client, which I think can be quite powerful. We then have things like business development dashboards, other data capture mechanisms, and also CRM tools, which are going to help sort of mobilize that whole process, which might traditionally have been at your desk when you could get around to it. Now you can do it anywhere, on the train, at home, on the move, or right where you need to be doing it, which is when you're with the client trying to capture exactly the information you need.
So if we stop for a minute, take a breath, we've all sort of been talking about content over the last 20 minutes or so, and let's deconstruct that a bit. So think in terms of the industry team lead in your firm, or think in terms of the key account partner, and think in terms of some of the business development managers in your organization who are internally going between a couple of offices, bringing together the resources to ensure that the upcoming meeting with that client or that prospect or that referral source is going to sing, that there will be that live sort of market-facing tab on what's happening in that client's marketplace or what's driving that referral source to think about your firm as the must-have, must-go-to resource. And in the context of all of the different resources that can, again, be utilized on a mobile platform, these are some ones that are, while illustrative, also speak to the core of what's there. So those folks that are working can be putting together the assets, rearranging the content, sort of deconstructing what might be in your experience database, framing some particular market moves in a particular geography in which your client is thinking about expanding. All of that can literally, on that device, with a bunch of folks sitting around a table collaborating together, be put together. In exchange, or after which, they then get on the plane or they get on the train, they go to meet with that client or that prospective client, and as we led at the outset, there can be that active engagement where the iPad becomes, in effect, the tool by which the presentation is given. There is the active tactile discussion, the engagement, the understanding that this is a live, iterative process, something that is of extreme value to that client in the relationship.
Yeah, and one of the key words there is live, is the ability to have information, whether it's a business development person back at the firm giving you the latest information about certain things, or having feeds around deal alerts. All of this goes to being able to really understand the opportunities that are out there, and then be, very live and converse in those opportunities and discussions, and have that data to hand.
And when we're saying deal alerts, to use that again as an example, so when you're there in that client's office or in that prospective client's office having that discussion and using the iPad or whatever the device is as a way to facilitate the discussion, and that alert pops right up that you've got a move that's just been announced in a particular market, that is something that can be pretty important. That can be incredibly valuable, and it obviously demonstrates the way in which you folks look at the business opportunities.
Yeah, and it's also very, very straightforward in having access to other practice group information and what they've been doing and what experience they have. If you're not an expert in those, wouldn't it be great to have access to the latest information that you can talk conversely, or be able to just in the meeting send information to the prospect or the client about other parts of the firm that you may not have been fully versed in.
So let's switch gears and talk a little bit about the future. We're sort of on the home stretch here. Mark, what are you seeing, and where do you see the opportunities for law firms to gain an additional competitive edge?
Yeah, well, I think what we're seeing in other sectors is gamification, and gamification is simply about making business development and sales competitive, and sort of making tools within these apps and things like that to see who's doing the most activities and who's being most engaged with these apps. We're also seeing tablets become very standard issue, whether it's the firm issuing them or people bring them to work. It's something that these firms have to get around. But key account management and client-only apps, I think that's going to be a big, big shift. I think the fact that you could provide one of your key clients with a very specific portal for information that's specific to them, one of your larger clients, of course, I think that's going to be the future. And we're already seeing some firms out there explore this area.
And I think as the sort of bargaining power continues to transform between lawyer and client, we're going to see increased not only expectations of that kind of offering made by the law firm, but we're going to see those demands.
Yeah. And then corporate branded flipbooks is referring to, flipbook is a very successful, one of the biggest successful multiple content source type apps out there. And what flipbook's done well for consumers, I believe there's a chance for some of the more innovative firms to create their own flipbook. So to be a source of knowledge, not just from proprietary custom content of their own, but also bringing content from other sources to add value to their client.
And look at the mantra off which the reInvent Law Lab works, and they speak very eloquently and passionately about the importance of firms, law firms, thinking of themselves as curators and bringing that sort of best of class, best practice approach to how the end client needs to think about its business or the risks in its particular market.
And we're going to see the last point that we'll touch on, I think, here is the consumerization of IT. It's already well underway, but IT teams at firms are going to have to really get their head around the fact that personal devices and business devices are really being used as one. And that's something that's going to have to be dealt with by these firms and be very, very proactive about dealing with it in the future.
So let's conclude with a couple of takeaways here. We've articulated 5 components of certainly the discussion that we've had over the last few minutes. This is an effort, sort of the alignment of a technology tablet-based program with content has to be thought of as having both internal and external power. This is not an either-or, so a sales enablement effort that has got content for use internally within the organization that also can be used to drive the distribution and publication of content to clients is of critical importance. Content is king again. We could put the parentheses and change the word in any number of different ways here, but the reality is that we are looking at a marketplace where the tools and the technology are critically important, obviously, but there has got to be that world-class, publisher-minded content. Think in terms of working off of an editorial calendar.
Yeah, and then it's important, just to finish on, do more with less. So it's about keeping it simple. We don't need apps that do everything. We need apps that do things very, very well. And in a business development context, we don't want to overcomplicate things when business development is already challenging enough. It's important to invest in both the hardware and the software. There's no use issuing everyone with tablets, then they're off doing their own thing and no one's coordinated centrally, and content is all over the place. The software must be something that the firm has to lead with and set those priorities. But most importantly, it's about acting now, because it's not a matter of if you adopt, but when. And what we're seeing is a lot of firms aren't sort of taking that jump, because you do have to leapfrog where you probably are currently. And we feel that that is something that every firm has to face, that fact that, look what's happened in the market, you need to take those jumps, you need to take them very soon.
And as you think in terms of acting now, this is an extraordinary opportunity for firms to bring an authentic point of view, to keep all of the business developers within the firm, again, everybody being in the business of business development, keeping them all sort of not only on message, but working strategically to your articulated objectives. Thanks very much. We appreciate having the opportunity to chat with you. Have a good day.
Thank you.